I now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join in welcoming Your Excellency to the Council chambers and in wishing success to Bahrain's presidency. Please be reassured of Liberia's fullest cooperation. We thank the Assistant Secretary General to the United Nations and the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council for their qualified briefings. Mr. President, we meet at a moment when geography is no longer a buffer. It is actually a bridge over which crises travel faster than diplomacy, and across which regional tremors can quickly become global shocks. In such a challenging world, the promise of Chapter 8 of the Charter is the difference between reaction and prevention, between escalation of a conflict and its containment. The partnership between the United Nations and regional organizations, including the Gulf Cooperation Council, reflects a simple truth. Proximity breeds insight. And insight, when matched with global legitimacy, can produce effective action. As underscored by the briefers, regional actors bring contextual knowledge, political credibility, and agility needed for early warning, mediation, and response. In this regard, Liberia wishes to make the following points. First, regional collaboration must now move from affirmation to architecture. We do not need more declarations of partnerships. We need, as you indicated yourself, Your Excellency, structured systems of partnership. This means institutionalized information sharing, joint analysis, and coordinated response mechanisms between the United Nations and regional bodies like the GCC. The risks we face, from political tensions to transnational threats, are interconnected. Our responses, therefore, must be as well. Second, prevention must be the organizing principle of the UN GCC cooperation. The GCC's proximity to emerging crises positions it as an early warning asset. But early warning without early action is merely early disappointment. The Council must empower and trust regional partners to act decisively in mediation and de-escalation while ensuring coherence with international law and the UN Charter. Third, maritime security is no longer a narrow technical issue. It is, in truth, a test of collective resolve. The security of strategic waterways, including the Strait of Hormuz, is integral to global stability. Disruptions to lawful transit are not regional inconveniences. They are global threats. Strengthened UN-GCC cooperation in safeguarding these corridors must combine deterrence, diplomacy, and adherence to international law. Fourth, partnership must extend beyond crisis management to addressing root causes. As highlighted by the briefers, cross-cutting priorities, women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, tolerance, food and water security, as well as environmental pressures, are not peripheral issues. They are the fault lines along which future conflicts will certainly emerge. A UN-GCC partnership that invests in those areas is not just managing instability, it is preventing it. Fifth, burden sharing must move from intention to action. The GCC has demonstrated capacity in mediation, humanitarian response, and development support, as we heard comprehensively from the Secretary General. The United Nations must now match this with coordination, legitimacy, and strategic alignment. Effective multilateralism is not about duplication. It is about division of labor grounded in comparative advantage. Mr. President, Liberia speaks from experience. We know what it means to emerge from conflict. And we know that peace is not delivered by distant actors alone. It is built through partnerships that combine local knowledge, regional engagement, and international support. In West Africa, collaboration between the United Nations and regional bodies has shown that those closest to the problem are often closest to the solution, if, however, they are empowered and supported. But we have also learned that coordination gaps can be costly. Fragmented efforts delay peace. Competing mandates confuse it even further. And absent ownership certainly undermines it. The lesson, therefore, has to be clear. Partnerships must be deliberate, not incidental. This is why we must guide against a forced choice between regional action and global authority. This is not a competition. It is a complementarity, as speakers before me have pointed out. The United Nations provides legitimacy. Regional organizations provide immediacy. Together, they provide effectiveness. Finally, Mr. President, to prevent the conflicts of tomorrow, we must strengthen the partnerships of today. The UN-GCC relationship offers a good template, not just for one region, but for a new model of cooperative security. Let us build it, build upon it, strengthen it with clarity. Let us resource it with seriousness, and let us measure it not by the number of meetings we will hold, but by the number of conflicts we prevent. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Liberia. The 10,128th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. I should like to take this opportunity to pay tribute on behalf of the Council to His Excellency Mr. Michael G. Waltz, Permanent Representative of the United States, for his service as President of the Council for the month of March. I'm sure I speak for all members of the Council in expressing deep appreciation to Ambassador Waltz and his team for the great diplomatic skill with which they conducted the Council's business last month. The provisional agenda for this meeting is cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations in maintaining international peace and security, Gulf Cooperation Council. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. Khalid Khiyari, Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, Europe, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific, Departments of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and Peace Operations, and His Excellency Mr. Jassim Al-Badawi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of items 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2026/260, a letter dated 30th of March 2026 from the Permanent Representative of Bahrain to the United Nations, addressed to the Secretary General, transmitting a concept paper on the item under consideration. I now give the floor to Mr. Khalid Khiyari.
سيد الرئيس معالي الوزير دكتور عبد اللطيف بن راشد الزياني.
Mr. President,
Thank you for the opportunity to address the Security Council in its first ever consideration of cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council, alongside His Excellency Mr. Jassim Al-Badawi, Secretary General of the GCC. At a time of heightened regional tensions, partnership with regional and sub-regional organizations such as GCC remains indispensable. It is a vital part of our collective efforts to promote regional peace, security, and stability. Mr. President, as we meet today, the Middle East stands at a dangerous precipice. The Secretary General has condemned the military strikes carried out against Iran on 28 February, as well as the attacks launched by Iran against the countries of the GCC and Jordan. These actions are clear violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the affected countries. All actors must pull back from the brink and immediately cease hostilities. In its resolution 2817, this Council demanded the immediate cessation of all attacks by Iran against Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan. These attacks have been condemned by this Council and must stop now. Escalating hostilities are posing an acute and rapidly growing threat to international peace and security. Attacks on energy infrastructure and other civilian sites are particularly alarming. They are causing devastating harm to civilians and creating serious risks for the global economy, especially for the most vulnerable. Disruptions to maritime routes in the Gulf and surrounding waters are also having global economic repercussions. They heighten the risk of broader confrontations. All parties must respect freedom of navigation, which is the cornerstone of international maritime law. The United Nations system is fully mobilized to mitigate the consequences of this spiraling conflict. However, the most effective way to do so is clear. The fighting must stop now. The Secretary General remains in close contact with leaders across the region and beyond. To reinforce United Nations diplomatic efforts, he has appointed Jean Arnaud as his personal envoy to lead UN efforts on the Middle East conflict and its consequences. Mr. President, the ongoing escalation and its consequences underline the urgent need for coordinated multilateral action. In this regard, strengthened cooperation between the United Nations and the GCC is imperative. The GCC and its member states have played a pivotal role in diffusing regional tensions and facilitating mediation in deeply complex situations. They have also shown restraint in the face of current volatility and rising tensions. They have an important role to play in supporting de-escalation, safeguarding regional stability, and promoting pathways toward dialogue. Mr. President, while the current war dominates international attention, conflicts elsewhere, including in the Middle East, continue unabated. In the occupied Palestinian territory, consolidating the ceasefire in Gaza and advancing the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2803 remain urgent priorities. These steps are necessary not only to stabilize the situation, but also to create space for meaningful recovery efforts. These efforts must be Palestinian-led and must preserve the unity of Gaza and the occupied West Bank. It is imperative to protect the territorial, political, and institutional integrity of the OPT. Progress in Gaza cannot be pursued in isolation from the broader context affecting the Palestinian people as a whole. In this regard, GCC support has been instrumental in mobilizing political attention and resources for humanitarian response and early recovery efforts. It has also helped reinforce a unified regional approach to a sustainable political horizon. In Syria, the United Nations continue to engage closely with the government and members of the GCC to coordinate support for an inclusive, Syrian-owned and Syrian-led political transition. The United Nations remain ready and committed to doing everything possible to help the Syrian people realize their legitimate aspirations and to support stability in the region. We welcome the GCC's continued support for Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and stability. We are equally grateful for its support for the state to exercise exclusive authority throughout its territory, in line with relevant Security Council resolution, including Resolution 1701. We also appreciate the GCC's support for the flash appeal launched by the Secretary General in Beirut on 13 of March. In Yemen, the United Nations continue its effort to preserve space for the resumption of a Yemeni-led political process to end the conflict, despite the Houthis' escalating actions. In this regard, close coordination with members of the GCC remains crucial. We also welcome the GCC's continued engagement on Sudan, including its support for mediation efforts. Close collaboration between our two organizations is important to create conducive conditions for a ceasefire and pave the way for a political process. The United Nations also attach great importance to its partnership with the GCC in preventing and countering terrorism. In this context, we welcome the strong cooperation between the GCC and the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. Mr. President, the United Nations and the GCC have long shared common objectives in the pursuit of regional peace, security, and stability. In June last year, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 79/295 on cooperation between the United Nations and the GCC. The resolution welcomes the enhanced partnership between our two organizations in conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and mediation. It also opens new opportunities for collaboration. The United Nations remains committed to deepening its partnership with the GCC. This is not only timely, it is necessary. We must draw on our comparative advantages and respective strength in the pursuit of regional peace and stability. We stand ready to continue working with the GCC to strengthen our joint efforts to advance peaceful solutions in the region. At a time of profound regional volatility, the value of this cooperation is clearer than ever. Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
I thank Mr. Khiari for his briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Jassim Al-Badawi.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Mr. President, Excellencies, members of the Security Council, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to express my sincere thanks and deep appreciation to the Kingdom of Bahrain for the invitation today to participate in this high-level briefing on cooperation between the UN and GCC under the agenda item of cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations in maintaining international peace and security. It is an honor for me to present the first ever briefing delivered by a GCC Secretary General before the Security Council since the GCC's establishment. This is an important turning point and a new beginning toward greater support and coordination that will benefit all partners. I would also like to congratulate the Kingdom of Bahrain on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, wishing all the success. Mr. President, I had intended to begin this briefing by shedding light on the GCC and its regional and international relations and partnerships. However, the aggression currently carried out by Iran against GCC states has prevented me from doing so. Since the 28th of February 2026 and to date, GCC states have been subjected to Iranian attacks using ballistic missiles and armed drones. These attacks have targeted civilian and vital facilities, including civilian airports, oil installations, water desalination plants, ports, fuel storage facilities, service facilities, residential and commercial areas, and diplomatic missions. These attacks have resulted in civilian and military casualties and injuries, as well as significant material damage, threatening the safety and security of citizens and residents. In this context, the GCC strongly condemns these blatant Iranian attacks, which constitute a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of GCC states, the principles of good neighborly relations, and clear violations of international law and the UN Charter. Targeting civilian and civilian assets is a grave breach of international humanitarian law and cannot be justified under any circumstances. The GCC reaffirms the urgent need to immediately halt these attacks, restore security, stability, and calm in the region, and ensuring the safety of air and maritime navigation, and the safety of international supply chains, and protect global energy markets. The GCC welcomes Security Council Resolution 2817, which condemned the attacks and called for their cessation. The Council stresses the importance of implementing this resolution fully and taking all necessary measures to ensure compliance, accountability, and determinants in support of regional and international peace and security. In this context, GCC states reaffirm their inherent right to self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter and will take all necessary measures to protect their sovereignty, territorial integrity, citizens and residents without abandoning their unwavering commitment to avoid any dangerous escalation that serves no one. GCC states do not seek war. They seek the peace, security and stability that all peoples deserve, while emphasizing that dialogue and diplomacy remain the best path to resolving crises. Continued escalation threatens regional security and risks dangerous consequences for international peace and security. Mr. President, Iran's destabilizing conduct in the Arabian Gulf has exceeded all red lines. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, prevented commercial vessels and oil tankers from transiting, and imposed conditions on some to pass through the strait. Meanwhile, the conflict has expanded as Houthi militias imposed a blockade on the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. actions that violate the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. We stress that disruptions to maritime navigation do not stop at the borders of GCC states. They now affect many countries around the world which are suffering shortage of oil, gas, fertilizers, and petrochemicals. We call upon the Security Council to assume its full responsibility and take all necessary measures to protect maritime routes and ensure the safe continuation of international navigation. While the GCC stresses here the need to issue a resolution that allows the use of all necessary measures available, tools to allow the safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz and the safety of transiting through it, and that Iran stops any attacks on the vessels and to ensure sustainable opening of the Strait of Hormuz. While the GCC desires normal relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran and a resolution of all security issues transparently, including Iran's nuclear program and the 3 occupied UAE islands, through taking numerous confidence-building steps, including adherence to the principles of non-interference in domestic affairs and abandoning destabilising activities and the support for armed militias. The GCC also calls on the Security Council to take all necessary measures to do the following. First, immediately halt Iranian attacks against GCC states. Second, protect maritime corridors and guarantee the uninterrupted maritime navigation through all strategic waterways, taking all necessary means to achieve that. Third, include GCC states in any discussions or agreements with Iran to enhance regional security and prevent further escalation or the repetition of such attacks in the future. Mr. President, although this is the first time that GCC is addressing the Security Council, yet it is not the first time that the GCC has assumed its international responsibilities. For decades, GCC states have been reliable political, humanitarian, and economic partners to the UN. The Council has supported UN programs and contributed to stability across multiple regions worldwide, particularly since Article 8 of the UN Charter recognizes the essential role of regional organizations as an inherent partner in maintaining collective security. In this context, in March 2024, the GCC adopted its comprehensive strategic regional vision to ensure security and stability at both regional and global levels. Mr. President, relations between the GCC and the UN date back to the GCC's establishment in 1981. This partnership has deepened over decades through formal cooperation mechanisms. This cooperation includes numerous memoranda of understanding with UN agencies and the UN, which institutionalized consultation, information exchange, and coordination to strengthen joint response effectively to regional and international challenges. One of the most important milestones in GCC UN cooperation was the UN General Assembly's adoption of Resolution 79/295 on cooperation between the UN and the Gulf Cooperation Council, which ushered in a new strategic phase. This coordination is essential in crisis management, combining UN legitimacy with GCC's deep understanding of regional dynamics and specificities to enhance international response and contribute to containing crises. Mr. President, the GCC has never been a party to crises. Instead, it had championed peaceful solutions based on dialogue and diplomacy and has supported stability across numerous regional issues. The Council continues coordinating with the UN and international partners in crisis resolution and reinforcing regional and international security. Its accumulated expertise has strengthened stability, dialogue, and reconciliation initiatives. Among the many efforts that the GCC undertakes in supporting stability among different parties, and allow me to summarize some of the key GCC efforts in the regional files of Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. I begin with our foremost issue, namely the Palestinian question. The GCC reiterates its unwavering support, and the GCC member states make all efforts to support the Palestinian question. We commend particularly the efforts of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, chair of the Arab and Islamic Ministerial Committee on Gaza, established by the Extraordinary Arab Islamic Summit to address the Israeli aggression on Gaza. Saudi leadership of the International Coalition for implementing the two-state solution led to the adoption of the New York Declaration, later affirmed by the UN General Assembly resolution September 2025. We also commend Qatar's persistent mediation efforts with regional and international partners to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza, secure the release of detainees and hostages, and ensure the entry of humanitarian aid to the civilians. The GCC also continues, and we commend the efforts to provide humanitarian assistance to Palestinian people despite the challenges facing our region. On Yemen, the GCC continues its steadfast support for UN efforts and its special envoy to Yemen towards reaching a comprehensive, just, and sustainable political solution that ensures Yemen's security, stability, unity, sovereignty, and independence. The solution must be based on the GCC initiative, its implementation mechanism, the outcomes of the National Dialogue Conference, and UN Security Council Resolution 2216. These are the frameworks based on which any political solution should be based. GCC states through development funds and Saudi Arabia's Yemen Support and Reconstruction Program, and in partnership with UNDP, has provided humanitarian and development assistance. Regarding Lebanon, the GCC has undertaken significant efforts to support Lebanese sovereignty, calling for full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Stressing the need for Israel to respect Lebanese borders and the extension of state authority over all Lebanese territory. We condemn the recent Israeli attacks on Lebanon that have resulted and are breaching the Lebanese sovereignty and have resulted in more than 1,000 civilian deaths, hundreds or thousands of injured, displacement of over 1 million people from the south of Lebanon, constituting 20% of the population, and destruction of critical infrastructure, including health and civilian facilities, as well as attacks on UNIFIL peacekeepers. On Syria, the GCC has worked diligently to pave the way for stability and reintegration of Syria into its Arab and international environment, based on the principles of unity and sovereignty, and creating conditions for restoring internal security and economic recovery. The GCC played a major role in lifting international sanctions on Syria and provided humanitarian and development assistance to rebuild infrastructure in the sectors of electricity, energy, and government institutions. GCC development funds have provided loans and development assistance across many countries worldwide in infrastructure, health, and social services, supporting reconstruction through international financing mechanisms. I would like here to highlight the important humanitarian role of GCC states, which provided between 2020 and 2025 humanitarian aid exceeding $14 billion, making the GCC collectively the fourth top humanitarian donors across the world. The GCC states have actively contributed to peace building, conflict prevention, women's and youth empowerment, and food and environmental security. Notable achievements include consolidating of the dialogue and the culture of peace. Notably, we were able to Bahrain's success in March 2025 in securing UN General Assembly resolution establishing the 28th of January as the International Day of Peaceful Coexistence, and Qatar's successful sponsorship of the UN Human Rights Council resolution in October 2025 on enhancing and protecting the human rights of women and children in conflict and post-conflict situations. In addition to Qatar's hosting of the World Summit for Social Development in November 2025. In humanitarian assistance, Saudi Arabia and the UAE ranked second and eighth globally among top humanitarian donors in 2024, according to OCHA's financial tracking system. Regarding food security, Kuwait, through the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, has funded hundreds of projects worldwide to address food insecurity. In terms of peace and stability initiatives, Oman stands as a trusted regional and international mediator, exemplified by its recent efforts for reconciliation among different parties in the region, and also exemplified by its recent efforts between the United States and Iran. Mr. President, we in the GCC and the GCC citizens take pride in the high standing our countries have achieved globally, especially in economic and development indicators. The GCC is a cornerstone of the global economy, particularly since GCC GDP reached $2.3 trillion in 2024. Second, GCC states produce 16 million barrels per day of crude oil, which is equivalent to 22% of the global output. Third, GCC exports 27% of the world's crude oil, 11.5 million barrels per day. Four, GCC holds 33% of global oil reserves, approximately 512 billion barrels, and 21% of global natural gas reserves, approximately 44 trillion cubic meters. 5. GCC produces 442 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. That is 10% of global production. These essential energy indicators underscore two realities. Any disruption in the Gulf immediately affects global markets, and this has become evident in recent events when navigation in Strait of Hormuz has been disrupted as a result of the current events. This has led to higher oil prices, increased shipping and insurance costs, and heightened risks to global energy and economic stability. Second, these indicators show that stability in the Arabian Gulf is not merely a regional concern, but is rather a global necessity to keep the world economy functioning and prevent a catastrophic energy crisis. Mr. President, I conclude by emphasizing that we stand at a crossroads, a real test of the credibility of the international system. Either collective security prevails and is safeguarded, or we leave the world vulnerable to the rule of force. We in the GCC are advocates of stability and partners in responsibility. We extend our hand in peace, yet we will not compromise our security, sovereignty, or regional stability. The Arabian Gulf must remain a region of stability, not a conduit of chaos, and the global economy cannot be held hostage to conflict. Despite current challenges, the Gulf stands as a pillar of stability and an essential partner in international peace and security. Thank you. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
I thank Mr. Boudawi for his briefing. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, Your Excellencies, representatives of the Member States, distinguished guests, peace and God's mercy and blessings be upon you. It is my honor at the outset to convey to your esteemed Council the greetings of His Majesty, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of the Kingdom of Bahrain. God protect him. And the greetings of His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, Crown Prince and Prime Minister. May God protect him. I express their deep appreciation for the constructive role played by the Security Council and its efforts to safeguard international peace and security. It gives me pleasure to express the Kingdom of Bahrain's great pride in its membership in the Security Council as a non-permanent member for the years 2026-2027 and in its presidency of the Council's meetings during this session. Here, I also wish to thank the delegation of the United States of America. I thank them for their exceptional presidency of the Council last month. I thank Mr. Khalid Khiyari, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas, and Asia and the Pacific, for his valuable briefing. I thank His Excellency, Mr. Jassim Mohammed Al-Bdawi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, for his comprehensive presentation and briefing, and we appreciate his acceptance of the invitation to participate in this meeting. I express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Member States for the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2817, submitted by the Kingdom of Bahrain on behalf of the GCC member states and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, on the Iranian attacks, the illegal Iranian attacks using ballistic missiles and drones that clearly appear to be meticulously pre-planned, thus reflecting Iran's aggressive intentions towards our peaceful and neighboring countries that are neighbors to Iran. These attacks have targeted civilian infrastructure and vital facilities and residential areas, including airports, ports, hotels, energy facilities, factories, universities, food security services, public service sites, residential areas, water stations, and diplomatic premises, causing significant losses in life and property. We thank God Almighty that the efficiency and preparedness of the armed forces and air defense systems in the GCC states and Jordan courageously and efficiently intercepted these ballistic missiles and drones, dealing with them with a high sense of professionalism, helping to neutralize the threat and reduce its effects and protect lives and vital establishments and capabilities. We express our appreciation for the Security Council's firm commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the GCC states. We thank them for the wide support the resolution received from 136 UN member states, which is a strong indication of the international community's strong rejection of these Iranian attacks which violate international law, the United Nations Charter, and the principles of good neighborliness. In this context, the Kingdom of Bahrain welcomes the adoption by the Human Rights Council in Geneva of Resolution L38 that was tabled by my country, Bahrain, addressing the human rights implications of the treacherous Iranian attacks targeting GCC states and Jordan. The resolution was adopted during an urgent debate session that was held during the current session on the 25th of March. That resolution received unprecedented support from 115 co-sponsoring states. This reflects the international community's will and commitment to the protection of human rights. The resolution includes explicit and strongly worded condemnation of Iran's attacks as a grave violation of international law, including international human rights law and international humanitarian law. This international human rights position, which we greatly appreciate, confirms the international community's absolute rejection of Iran's repeated violations, which are acts that disregard international law, treaties, and Security Council resolutions. These actions are stripped of all values, be they religious, moral, or humanitarian. Your Excellencies, it is deeply regrettable that the Islamic Republic of Iran did not simply stop at its treacherous attacks on the GCC states and Jordan, including their civilian infrastructure, where they spilled the pure blood of innocents and terrorized citizens and residents. It did not stop at that. Rather, it went further and threatens the global economy through closing the Strait of Hormuz and restricting the freedom of international navigation through it. These actions endanger energy security and food supplies and global trade. These actions are a blatant violation of international law and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We commend your esteemed Council for emphasizing in your resolution number 2817, emphasizing the importance of maritime security and the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and for recognizing that any disruption to such vital waterways could have serious implications for international trade and global economic stability. Based on the above, the Kingdom of Bahrain submitted a draft resolution to your esteemed Council on Iran's unlawful and unjustified attempt to control international navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, placing before your esteemed Council a challenge that requires a decisive response to such actions that are irresponsible and illegitimate, actions that threaten the interests of nations and peoples around the world. We are confident that this draft resolution is consistent with international law and with the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which guarantees the right of transit passage through straits without obstruction, contrary to what Iran is doing today. We look forward to a unified position from this esteemed Council during the vote that will take place on the draft resolution tomorrow, God willing. Your Excellencies, as the Kingdom of Bahrain holds the current presidency of the Gulf Cooperation Council, I wish to thank the Security Council for dedicating this session to discussing the cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council. This is a relationship that the GCC member states have consistently given care to strengthening in full commitment with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. The GCC believes that its active membership with the United Nations can enhance the vital role of regional organizations in addressing global challenges and conflicts, as stipulated by Chapter 8 of the Charter. Since its establishment 45 years ago, the Gulf Cooperation Council has stated that it is an active and interactive regional organization, deeply engaged with regional and international issues, contributing to the enhancement of regional peace and security. The GCC has always sought to share the world's concerns, support its just causes, and use all of its capabilities and relations and global partnerships to help promote regional and international stability, be it through mediation or support for diplomatic solutions, humanitarian assistance, counter-terrorism efforts, combating organized crime, promoting tolerance and coexistence, and human fraternity, supporting sustainable development in least developed countries, protecting the environment, and advocating for a lasting and comprehensive peace. And in accordance with Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter on the importance of regional organizations and the role they play in resolving disputes and contributing towards the maintenance of international peace and security, the GCC played a prominent role in resolving the Yemeni crisis in the year 2011. It did that through the Gulf Initiative and its implementation mechanism, which helped stop the bloodshed and address the crisis peacefully. This initiative became and remains to this day one of the key international reference points for resolving the Yemeni crisis. In addition, the GCC had an active role in reducing the severity of regional conflicts and supporting efforts to settle disputes in countries in the region, countries such as Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Libya, and Gaza. The GCC will continue these efforts in cooperation and partnership with the United Nations and peace-loving countries. Also within the framework of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, cooperation between the United Nations and the GCC continues to grow, though it has not reached the level of a full institutional framework. Despite the great potential it carries towards enhancing international peace and security and maintaining them. The experience, especially the Gulf Initiative in Yemen, clearly demonstrates that effective coordination between regional and international efforts can yield tangible results in supporting political processes and reducing escalation. And based on this experience, there is a clear need to develop a more organized and structured mechanism to coordinate work between the United Nations and regional organizations in a manner that would ensure consistency and complementarity in addressing growing challenges. In this context, we emphasize the importance of working on establishing regular and periodic meetings, including annual gatherings between the Security Council and regional organizations, in a manner that would strengthen strategic consultations and the exchange of assessments, and would support a collective and more effective response to regional and international crises. We at the Gulf Cooperation Council recognize the importance of enhancing cooperation and partnership with the United Nations across many vital issues. We recognize the need to use all available means to achieve our common objectives. This includes strengthening the appropriate mechanisms for enhancing dialogue and strategic cooperation and joint coordination, and increasing consultations on the efforts that the United Nations is exerting in the fields of the maintenance of international peace and security, humanitarian action, and sustainable development, and towards the empowerment of women and youth in promoting peace and security. We at the GCC, and with the leadership and wisdom of their majesties and excellencies, the heads of state, may God protect them, we will remain unwavering in our commitment to international agreements and conventions. We remain committed to our belief in international law, and we believe that a better future for humanity requires active international partnership that is founded on the values of peace, coexistence, cooperation, and human fraternity. I thank you, and may God and blessings and peace be upon you.
I assume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Mr. President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo welcomes His Excellency Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain. We are deeply honored by your presence this morning. This gesture does not go unnoticed at such a trying time for your country and for all of the civilian populations of the affected Gulf countries. We take this opportunity to reiterate to you our solidarity and compassion. My delegation thanks you for convening this high-level meeting. We welcome the leadership of the Kingdom of Bahrain within the Security Council, as well as its constant efforts to strengthen dialogue, multilateralism, and partnerships with regional organizations, in particular the Gulf Cooperation Council. We thank Mr. Kalekiari, Assistant Secretary General, and His Excellency Mr. Yassim Al-Budaiwi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, whose statements were a valuable contribution to our discussions. Mr. President, a worrisome intensification of tensions in the Gulf region marked by a military escalation with potentially serious consequences continues to expose the civilian population there to violence whose outcome remains uncertain. Behind the geopolitical dynamics at play, human lives are being endangered every day. Essential infrastructure affected and regional balances under strain. In this particularly volatile context, the Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for renewed collective commitment to de-escalation, dialogue, and for strict respect for international law. This meeting, dedicated to cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council, is in this regard fully in keeping with the spirit of Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter, which recognizes the essential role of regional organizations in the maintenance of international peace and security. The Democratic Republic of the Congo reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the fundamental principles of international law, international humanitarian law, and human rights law, as well as to the principles and purposes enshrined in the UN Charter. We remain guided by a constant approach that promotes respect for the sovereignty of states, territorial integrity, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the non-use of force in a spirit of responsibility and balance. In this regard, my delegation notes with appreciation the Gulf Cooperation Council's engagement in efforts to maintain international peace and security. As is underlined in the concept note, the GCC plays an increasing role in conflict prevention, mediation, and humanitarian work alongside the work of the United Nations. Turning to Resolution 2817 of 2026, the Democratic Republic of the Congo supported its adoption, guided by our unstinting commitment to the principles of the Charter, to the sovereignty of states, and the preservation of international stability. Drawing on our history, we follow particularly closely any action that may constitute a violation of these principles, while calling for a measured approach based on dialogue and law. In this context, my delegation also underscores the importance of respecting customary international law and the law of the sea, as is enshrined in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We recall that freedom of navigation, the security of waterways, and respect for applicable international legal frameworks are essential to regional and international stability, particularly in strategic maritime areas. Mr. President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo grants particular importance to the cross-cutting dimensions of peace, particularly the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women, as well as the involvement of young people in conflict prevention and resolution processes. We reiterate our call for their increased inclusion in decision-making processes, as well as for boosting their protection in crises contexts. In the light of persistent tensions in the Middle East region, we call for sustained and strengthened diplomatic efforts to reach peaceful, sustainable, and inclusive solutions. We encourage any initiative to promote de-escalation, foster confidence, and create the conditions for a constructive dialogue between the parties. In this regard, the Democratic Republic of the Congo pays tribute to the facilitation and mediation efforts undertaken by several states in the region, particularly the Sultanate of Oman, the State of Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, as well as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We welcome their respective contributions to de-escalation, dialogue, and stabilization efforts. My delegation further recognizes the engagement of Arab states within multilateral mechanisms that work for peace, including their contribution to the Board of Peace. This speaks to their determination to promote a collective, coordinated approach in conflict prevention and peace building. Mr. President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo remains convinced that increased cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations such as the GCC represents a critical tool to address contemporary challenges in international peace and security. Such cooperation, based on complementarity, coordination, and respect for respective mandates, is vital to guaranteeing more effective, inclusive, and sustainable responses. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Democratic Republic of the Congo for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pakistan congratulates the brotherly kingdom of Bahrain for assuming the presidency of the Security Council. And we warmly welcome Your Excellency, the Foreign Minister, to preside over this very important session. We also welcome His Excellency, Mr. Jassim Mohammad Al-Budawi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and appreciate his detailed and invaluable contribution to our deliberations on the cooperation between the UN and the GCC. And let me also thank ASG Khalid Kyari for his briefing. Mr. President, the cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations, as set forth in Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, is fundamental for the maintenance of international peace and security. And such partnerships are indispensable for advancing our collective objectives of peace and development. Regional organizations, with their contextual awareness and proximity to the evolving challenges, also serve as vital partners in prevention, mediation, and conflict resolution. Security Council Resolution 2788, adopted last July during Pakistan's presidency of the Council, recognized the role of regional and sub-regional organizations and arrangements in complementing the efforts of the UN to prevent conflicts and promote peaceful settlement of disputes. President, when it comes to the Middle East and the wider region, enhanced cooperation between the UN and the GCC represents a strategic necessity and a practical pathway towards more effective multilateral action. The proactive role and constructive efforts of the GCC on key regional issues, particularly regarding Palestine, Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon, are highly commendable. The GCC has truly emerged as a pivotal pillar of regional stability. Its members have demonstrated sustained commitment to peace, diplomacy, humanitarian engagement, and development cooperation, as we heard from His Excellency. Through proactive mediation efforts and contributions to addressing structural drivers of conflict, the GCC countries have played an important role in addressing many conflict situations around the world. The General Assembly's unanimous Resolution 79295 reaffirmed support for deeper cooperation between the UN and the GCC, highlighting the need for stronger coordination through regular high-level exchanges, joint initiatives, and broader collaboration across political, economic, and social areas. We support and reiterate its call to align priorities, promote multilateralism, and strengthen collective responses to global challenges, recognizing the GCC's growing role as a regional partner. The presidential statement to be adopted by the Security Council today will reinforce that message, in which Pakistan supports and welcomes. Pakistan attaches great importance to its fraternal relations with all GCC countries, rooted in shared religious and cultural values, mutual respect, and deep people-to-people ties. These bonds are reinforced by robust political, security, economic, and trade partnerships, energy, and development cooperation. Pakistan's vibrant diaspora across GCC serves as a vital bridge, contributing to the prosperity and development of the host countries and further strengthening our bilateral relations. Pakistan will always stand firmly alongside brotherly nations of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. President, the ongoing attacks on the brotherly Gulf countries targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure are totally unacceptable and which we have strongly condemned. We appreciate the strategic restraint by the GCC countries in the face of such provocation and aggression. Pakistan reaffirms its full support for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of all GCC states. As demanded by the Security Council Resolution 2817, the attacks on their territories must cease immediately, and the navigational rights and freedoms in the Strait of Hormuz must not be undermined. It is also important to acknowledge the broader context. The deeply troubling events in the region, including the initiation of attacks against Iran on 28 February, have led to dangerous escalation and rising tensions. These developments have undermined regional stability and carry serious implications for international peace and security, as well as global economy and prosperity. We categorically condemn all attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. The targeting of power plants, energy facilities, educational institutions, hospitals, and other essential civilian sites is unacceptable and must cease immediately. De-escalation and complete cessation of hostilities must be our top priority. At this critical juncture, restraint, diplomacy, and dialogue must prevail. Pakistan has been actively engaged in diplomatic efforts towards that end. Last week, the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia met in Islamabad. The discussions reflected a shared recognition of the urgent need to de-escalate tensions, intensify diplomatic engagement, and collectively pursue the peaceful resolution of ongoing crises. During the subsequent visit of Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Senator Muhammad Ishaq Dar, to Beijing earlier this week, China and Pakistan announced a 5-point initiative offering a sequenced roadmap comprising an immediate halt to hostilities, the launch of inclusive peace talks under guarantees of sovereignty, the protection of civilians and critical infrastructure in line with international law, the restoration of maritime security in the strategic Strait of Hormuz, and a firm reaffirmation of the UN Charter and international law as the indispensable framework for a lasting political settlement. Pakistan remains committed to continue playing its constructive role in promoting dialogue, fostering understanding, and supporting all efforts aimed at achieving lasting peace. President, in conclusion, we reaffirm our full support for the strengthened cooperation between the UN and the GCC, grounded in shared objectives. And we are confident that the sagacious and far-sighted leadership of the GCC countries will help advance peace, stability, and sustainable development in the region and beyond. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And allow me to take this opportunity to welcome you to the Council at the beginning of Bahrain's presidency. We wish you and your team the best during the course of this month, and you can count on our support. I also pay tribute to our US colleagues for their skillful stewardship of the Council during the busy month of March. President, the United Kingdom welcomes Bahrain's leadership in convening this first high-level meeting on cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council. We thank ASG Chiari and GCC Secretary-General Al-Badawi for their briefings. The GCC is a vital partner for the UN. Its deep understanding of regional dynamics and political credibility make it well positioned to support this Council's work. This meeting comes at a time of acute regional insecurity. The United Kingdom unequivocally and strongly condemns the egregious Iranian attacks against GCC and regional countries that target civilian areas, critical infrastructure, and vital economic assets. These strikes represent a direct threat to international peace and security. The United Kingdom stands in solidarity with all GCC states as they exercise their inherent right to defend their sovereignty and protect their citizens. We also reiterate our strong condemnation of Iran's unacceptable attempts to close the Strait of Hormuz. We commend Bahrain's leadership in driving Council action to address these threats, including through Security Council Resolution 2817. The resolution is clear. Such aggression is unacceptable and must cease immediately. Earlier today, my foreign minister hosted a meeting with over 40 countries to discuss efforts to reopen and ensure safe passage through the strait. She expressed her support for Bahrain's efforts to secure a further resolution on this issue. President, we commend GCC states for their constructive diplomatic efforts, particularly their effective role in mediation processes and humanitarian support. We also welcome their leadership on cross-cutting priorities, including women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, and work to address food, water and environmental pressures that increasingly drive insecurity. In Gaza and the West Bank, we now have a historic opportunity to end the cycle of violence and turn a page towards lasting peace by renewing our efforts to achieve a two-state solution. In this regard, we welcome the vital role the GCC states are playing in supporting efforts to implement Security Council Resolution 2803, particularly by ensuring humanitarian aid reaches the most vulnerable and supporting plans for Gaza's long-term reconstruction. Finally, the UK was proud to work in collaboration with the UAE and other Gulf counterparts to establish the Tolerance, Peace and Security Agenda in 2023, with the passing of Security Council Resolution 2686. Around the world, persecution and intolerance is widespread and on the rise, making our efforts to champion this agenda more important than ever. In conclusion, President, the United Kingdom remains steadfast in its commitment to working with the GCC, the United Nations, and all Council members to protect civilians, uphold international law, and advance peace, security, and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, thank you. I'd like to congratulate Bahrain on becoming the president of the Security Council in April. We are grateful to the American presidency for heading up the Security Council in March, and in particular for their foray into history, the history of the initial years of the Security Council. We'd like to thank the Bahraini presidency, namely the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdul Atif bin Rashid Al Zaini, for organising the first ever Security Council briefing on cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC. We are grateful to Assistant Secretary General Khalid Kiari and the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Mr. Jassim Al-Budaiwi, for their briefings. We deem today's briefing to be timely, primarily in the context of the current unprecedented escalation of violence in the Greater Middle East region that unfortunately is impacting countries that are friendly to Russia, including GCC countries. However, we cannot agree with the tendentious and one-sided comments of some of our colleagues in the Council. Attempts to distort the true picture of events and their causal links fit squarely with the overt desire of non-regional forces to derive benefit from and profit from the multiplication of hotbeds of chronic instability in the region. From our side, we'd like once again to reiterate that the current situation, the current conflict, did not occur in a vacuum. Rather, it was the direct result of an unprovoked act of aggression by the US and Israel against the sovereign territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Washington and Western Jerusalem could not fail to recognize the very serious impact of their military foray for countries of the region. On a daily basis, completely innocent people are dying, including women and children. The scale of damage to the energy and other essential infrastructure in Iran and in the Arab monarchies is growing by the minute. Irreparable damage is being done not only to regional stability, but also to global food and energy security and to the global economy as a whole. This is clearly attested to by the relevant assessments and forecasts of the appropriate UN structures, by price volatility on global markets, and by disruptions to the supply of energy and fertilizer. Once again, we call for a swift cessation of all hostilities which are bringing destruction and suffering to civilians. Russia is prepared to assist in the quest for a settlement to the current confrontation on a political and diplomatic basis with respect for international law and taking into consideration the legitimate interests of the states involved. We confirm our firm commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries in the region. Every day, it becomes clearer that the first step on the path to de-escalation is the cessation of strikes by Washington and Western Jerusalem on Iranian territory and the curbing of strikes by Iran on the territory of Arab states. It's time to stop and put an end to this dangerous game of playing with fire, this fire which risks turning into a full-scale and not just a regional conflagration. Mr. President, we agree with the views expressed today regarding the importance of stepping up cooperation between the UN and the GCC as two organizations which work to ensure peace and security on a regional and global level. We support such cooperation in the spirit of our traditional belief that there's a need to take into consideration the opinion of regional organizations in the work of the Security Council in those areas that directly pertain to them. We believe that the GCC is a political and economic body. We are convinced that its members, who are our Arab friends, have valuable insights to share with the Security Council regarding their analysis of the situation in the Gulf region, on developing a coordinated response to current threats and challenges, and to advancing a unifying socio-economic agenda. We, in turn, have established regular exchanges of views with the GCC on various topics of mutual interest. This robust political dialogue provides a solid basis for further continued development of a whole range of trade and economic and investment cooperation between our country and our Arab partners. Mr. President, the GCC member states occupy their rightful place as one of the key centres of the emerging multipolar world and are consistently strengthening their standing as important players on the world stage. As part of our regular dialogue with this regional structure, we have and will continue to pay particular attention to promoting Russia's concept for security in the Persian Gulf. This seeks, in this strategically important region, to promote good neighbourly relations between all littoral states. We talked about this a long time ago. The relevance of Russia's initiatives and considerations has been shored up by recent events in the region. We always underscore that our ideas in our concept, and our draft concept, are not done and dusted. Unlike our Western colleagues, we never impose blanket solutions or our own view as the correct one. Rather, we invite our Middle Eastern friends to engage in constructive discussions to find joint solutions that are in the interest primarily of the countries of the region themselves. In conclusion, we'd like to thank our Bahraini colleagues for the initiative of adopting, following today's meeting, a Security Council presidential statement on cooperation between the UN and the GCC. We note the constructive approach of the authors to reaching agreement on the text and the fact that we all managed to ensure that the document was kept depoliticized in nature. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to welcome you, Sir, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Kingdom of Bahrain. France would like to lend its entire support to the Kingdom of Bahrain. Bahrain is the President of the Council at a time when its security and its security of the entire region are under threat. My delegation would like to take this opportunity to congratulate and thank the US delegation for its presidency last month. I would like to thank the Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs, Mr. Khaled Kiari, and His Excellency, Mr. Jassim Abdullawi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council. And I would also like to wish him a warm welcome too. I'd like to thank them for their briefings. While the region is confronted with a dangerous military escalation because of the act of aggression by Iran, the Council, through its Resolution 2817, has lent its full support to the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Having condemned the Iranian attacks against its neighbour, it is now up to it to work to settle the current crisis. Dialogue and cooperation between this council and the member states of the GCC is one of the keys to a lasting diplomatic solution. The war has gone on far too long. France is calling for de-escalation and an end to attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure throughout the entire region. They need to be protected always and in all circumstances. Iran, by attacking its neighbours, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar, but also Jordan. Iran bears the primary responsibility for the current escalation. It has chosen a deleterious strategy for stability in the region by extending the conflict to Lebanon, where Hezbollah is carrying out a war in its name against Israel. France underscores that it stands in solidarity with its partners in the Gulf, victims of indiscriminate Iranian strikes. Strikes that are particularly heinous because the GCC have contributed to negotiations between Iran and the US on the nuclear file, hoping that diplomacy can lead to solutions. This escalation is coming at a time when Iran is pursuing a destabilising nuclear program in response to the ongoing non-respect of its commitments. We had to, last August, trigger the snapback mechanism to reimpose sanctions within the Council. The ballistic program and Iran's regional activities also are sources of major destabilization through the support that Tehran lends to non-state armed groups in the region, be this Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, or radical militia in Iraq and Syria. As regarding the use by Iran of these ballistic missiles, this is completely unjustified and very much justifies our concern regarding the situation. Making the Strait of Hormuz secure and guaranteeing freedom of navigation is a top priority, and our two bodies really need to cooperate on this. As the Council reiterated in Resolution 2817, obstacles to freedom of navigation is a threat to peace and international security. It is not acceptable that Iran has taken hostage a strategic maritime way. This disruption of traffic in the Strait of Hormuz is upsetting supply chains with pernicious consequences on the global economy, and it is the most fragile populations who are suffering the most. We need to step up cooperation between the UN and the GCC in order to preserve maritime security, in particular in strategic maritime corridors. To this end, defensive measures that avoid any broad use of force need to be promoted. We welcome the new task force set up by the Secretary General seeking to respond to the humanitarian needs in the Strait of Hormuz. Sir, increased cooperation between the Security Council and the Gulf Cooperation Council serves a double goal of bringing stability to the Middle East and to defending multilateralism. And there is an urgent need now to bring peace back to the region. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Your Excellency Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayani, and I take this opportunity to wish all the best to the Kingdom of Bahrain during this month of presidency, and I express that you can count on the support of Colombia in your work. I also take this opportunity to thank the delegation of the United States for a successful presidency last month. My delegation also takes this opportunity to express its thanks for this convening of the first briefing on cooperation between the Security Council, the United Nations, and the GCC. And we also welcome the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council and Mr. Khaled Khiari, the Assistant Secretary General. We thank them for their briefings. Mr. President, the cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations is complementary and vital to maintaining international peace and security. Organizations such as the Gulf Cooperation Council contribute profound understanding of the political, social, and cultural context of their region, as well as providing channels for dialogue and relevant capacity for preventive diplomacy, mediation, and early response to crises. In a context of rising tensions in the Middle East, this constructive role is particularly valuable. Colombia reiterates its deep concern at the recent attacks that have affected Gulf Cooperation Council member states and other countries that are not directly involved in the hostilities. We condemn the attacks on the civilian population and critical infrastructure, and we unequivocally reaffirm the importance of ensuring full respect for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of all states in accordance with the United Nations Charter and international law. Mr. President, Colombia takes note of the mediation and good offices initiatives undertaken by members of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the humanitarian response in the region. We also encourage continued efforts in this regard. We also underscore how important it is for this cooperation to encompass, in a cross-cutting manner, all of the structural challenges that need to be addressed to transition towards just, inclusive, and lasting peace. Such challenges will not find sustainable solutions without guaranteeing women's full, equal, meaningful, and safe political participation. To that extent, it is indispensable to include and strengthen the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Colombia also highlights that the Women, Peace and Security Agenda is just as essential. Guaranteeing the full, meaningful, and safe participation of young people, particularly in fragile and conflict-based contexts, contributes to boosting social resilience, fostering preventive approaches, and promoting sustainable and lasting solutions. In addition, strengthening and promoting peace also means incorporating environmental and climate factors. Prolonged droughts, food insecurity, floods, and access to natural resources are all vectors that can both intensify and worsen pre-existing tensions. For Colombia, it is fundamental to reflect on how climate risks have a bearing on international peace and security. Finally, Colombia reaffirms its commitment to multilateralism, preventive diplomacy, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. In light of the serious situation in the Gulf region, Colombia expresses its solidarity with all of the states and peoples affected by the conflict. It is urgent to step up diplomatic efforts to advance towards an effective de-escalation and a sustainable ceasefire. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Colombia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, It is my pleasure to extend our sincerest congratulations to the sister kingdom of Bahrain on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for this month. We wish you success and prosperity. I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al-Zayani, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and we value the convening of this important session, the first of its kind, on cooperation between the United Nations and the member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council. This is a session that represents a valuable step towards strengthening regional partnerships in support of international peace and security. We express our appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Khalid Khiyari, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific and the Americas, for his briefing. We express our appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Jassim Mohammed Al-Budawi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, for his valuable briefing. A briefing which highlights the vital role that the Council plays in supporting regional stability and enhancing multilateral action. Mr. President, Somalia believes in the vital role that regional and sub-regional organizations play in accordance with Chapter 8 of the Charter of the United Nations, a role that supports efforts to prevent conflicts and find a peaceful resolution to them and promote security and stability at the regional and international levels. In this context, the Gulf Cooperation Council has, and since its establishment, demonstrated its ability to play a constructive role in supporting mediation efforts, preventive diplomacy, and the de-escalation of tensions, in addition to its tangible contributions towards humanitarian work, reconstruction, and development efforts in a manner that increases the prospects for achieving a sustainable and comprehensive peace. Mr. President, amid growing security challenges, including protracted conflicts and cross-border threats, the importance of strengthening coordination between the UN and the GCC becomes even more evident, especially in the areas of conflict prevention, peace building, counterterrorism, and preventing violent extremism, as well as supporting efforts to address the root causes of these phenomena, amongst which are poverty, marginalization, lack of development, and the legacy of colonialism. We emphasize the need to enhance information sharing and institutional capacity building towards developing early warning mechanisms and effective crisis response strategies so that the international community's ability to address emerging challenges comprehensively and cohesively is strengthened. Mr. President, Security Council Resolution number 2817 underscores the importance of respecting the sovereignty of states and the protection of civilians. The resolution condemns the attacks and calls for an immediate cessation of actions that threaten stability or obstruct development in the region. Here, Somalia reaffirms its solidarity with the nations of the GCC member states, and we strongly condemn the intentional targeting of civilians and their vital infrastructure. Somalia stresses the importance of close cooperation between the United Nations and the GCC member states in confronting common challenges. Ensuring the security of vital maritime routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz, requires sustained coordination and collective action that is grounded in international law and the principles of good neighborliness. The freedom of navigation and the security of international trade are fundamental pillars of global economic stability It can only be achieved through effective partnerships between the United Nations and regional organizations. Somalia firmly believes that strengthening multilateral cooperation is the optimal path to addressing the complex challenges and threats facing the region. We reiterate our support for every effort that promotes dialogue and understanding and bolsters peace and security in the Arabian Gulf and its surrounding areas. Mr. President, we commend the role played by the GCC member states in supporting shared priorities that contribute to achieving a sustainable peace. This includes advancing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and the Youth Peace and Security Agenda. It also includes promoting values of tolerance and coexistence. And here we stress the importance of strengthening partnerships that empower youth and women to contribute effectively to mediation, peace building, and decision making in a way that achieves inclusive and sustainable development. Sustainable security and development go hand in hand. There can be no lasting peace without social justice and economic prosperity. Mr. President, the growing challenges facing our world today require deepening the institutional cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council. A cooperation that enhances the exchange of expertise, the coordination of efforts, and the development of more effective joint responses to regional and international challenges. In closing, Mr. President, Somalia reiterates its support for strengthening the strategic partnership between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council in a manner that reinforces the foundations of peace, security, and stability, and enhances multilateral work to confront shared challenges and to build a more prosperous future for the peoples of the region. And we express our appreciation to the efforts that Bahrain is making on the presidential statement on cooperation between the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council, which paves the way towards a stronger partnership with more coordination in the future. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias.
Thank you. Your Excellency Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain. We are pleased to extend a warm welcome to you, and we express our appreciation to you, your team, and your country as you take up the Security Council presidency this month. You can count on our staunch cooperation. Furthermore, we are grateful for the briefings provided by Mr. Khaled Kiari, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Europe, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific, and His Excellency Mr. Jassim Al-Budaiwi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council. We thank them for the valuable explanations that they provided in their briefings. The current international political backdrop is exerting significant pressure on the multilateral system that we have forged on the basis of the values of this organization. Multilateralism needs to adapt and stand stronger to respond to increasingly complex and interconnected threats. In this context, it is fundamental to strengthen regional organizations to preserve the balance and effectiveness of the international order. This must be done strictly in accordance with the principles and purposes enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, as well as with full respect for international law. Panama aspires to be a member of a UN that is capable of preventing conflicts before they occur, of finding sustainable solutions, reacting promptly to humanitarian emergencies, and effectively coordinating its efforts on the ground, as well as a UN that faithfully represents the diversity of people around the world. To that end, all member states are responsible for strengthening and never eroding the organization's capacities, respecting its mandates, supporting its mechanisms, and promoting consistent collective action that enhances its effectiveness and legitimacy. Preventing conflicts is more effective and less costly than responding to them. Hence why it is so essential to invest in early warning systems in regional organizations, to strengthen preventive diplomacy and consolidate effective negotiation and mediation mechanisms. Mr. President, close cooperation with the Gulf Cooperation Council and with other regional bodies, as well as with the UN system, particularly with the Security Council, is essential to garnering a more comprehensive understanding of the complexity of current challenges and to providing coordinated, legitimate, and effective responses to them. In this context, we value the role of the Gulf Cooperation Council in promoting regional stability, as well as its efforts in preventive diplomacy, mediation, and humanitarian assistance. This commitment is clearly reflected in the broad support of the international community for the text of Resolution 2817, tabled by Bahrain, in its capacity as Security Council member and on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which was successfully adopted. We extend our solidarity to all of the states of the Gulf that have unjustly suffered the consequences of a conflict that they did not start, and to which they have repeatedly stated they're not a party. We reiterate our deep concern regarding the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, given its implications for international maritime security and the protection of the global economy. We call on all of the parties involved in the conflict to preserve the security of international maritime routes and to avoid measures that endanger civilian vessels and seafarers. Panama underscores the need to guarantee safe passage along critical routes in strict accordance with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Any action that impedes maritime transport and affects supply chains represents a threat to international peace and security capacities, respecting its mandates, supporting its mechanisms, and promoting consistent collective action that enhances its effectiveness and legitimacy. Preventing conflicts is more effective and less costly than responding to them. Hence why it is so essential to invest in early warning systems in regional organizations, to strengthen preventive diplomacy and consolidate effective negotiation and mediation mechanisms. Mr. President, close cooperation with the Gulf Cooperation Council and with other regional bodies, as well as with the UN system, particularly with the Security Council, is essential to garnering a more comprehensive understanding of the complexity of current challenges and to providing coordinated, legitimate, and effective responses to them. In this context, we value the role of the Gulf Cooperation Council in promoting regional stability, as well as its efforts in preventive diplomacy, mediation, and humanitarian assistance. This commitment is clearly reflected in the broad support of the international community for the text of Resolution 2817, tabled by Bahrain, in its capacity as Security Council member and on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which was successfully adopted. We extend our solidarity to all of the states of the Gulf that have unjustly suffered the consequences of a conflict that they did not start, and to which they have repeatedly stated they're not a party. We reiterate our deep concern regarding the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, given its implications for international maritime security and the protection of the global economy. We call on all of the parties involved in the conflict to preserve the security of international maritime routes and to avoid measures that endanger civilian vessels and seafarers. Panama underscores the need to guarantee safe passage along critical routes in strict accordance with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Any action that impedes maritime transport and affects supply chains represents a threat to international peace and security, with impacts that fall most heavily on the most vulnerable populations around the entire world. Mr. President, it is vital to step up our collective efforts to favor diplomacy over confrontation, development over conflict, and human dignity over any other consideration. We therefore reiterate our support for those states and actors who resolutely support peace, cooperation, and the peaceful settlement of disputes, convinced that only through these principles will it be possible to advance towards a fairer, more inclusive and sustainable international order for present and future generations. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to extend sincere congratulations to the Kingdom of Bahrain on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of April, and warmly welcome you, Excellency, presiding over this meeting. We wish the Kingdom of Bahrain all success, and we look forward to collaborating closely on the Council agenda. I also pay tribute to the United States for the outstanding presidency of the month of March. And I welcome the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation countries, Mr. Jassim Al-Budaiwi, to this meeting, and thank him and Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for their valuable briefings. Mr. President, Latvia welcomes the Council's meeting on the cooperation between the UN and the GCC. The enhanced relationship between the two organizations, anchored in the UN General Assembly Resolution 79295, contributes to the Security Council's core goal of maintaining international peace and security. Across the Middle East and well beyond, the GCC and its member states are contributing substantially to the international stabilization and mediation efforts, countering terrorism and combating the spread of extremism, strengthening maritime security, and providing global humanitarian relief and development cooperation. Building closer ties is ever more important in times of heightened geopolitical tensions and the spiraling conflict in the wider Middle East. Iran's unprovoked attacks undermine the security, stability, and well-being of the GCC and countries beyond. In this context, we express our strong support for the principles of the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence. Latvia calls for de-escalation, protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure, and full respect of international law by all parties, including the principles of the United Nations Charter and international humanitarian law. On 11th of March, Latvia voted in favor of the Resolution 2817 submitted by Bahrain on behalf of the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council and Jordan. The said resolution, co-sponsored by 136 UN member states, is a clear example of the fruitful cooperation between the two organizations, proving that a cohesive regional effort can unite a broad international community. And we reiterate full solidarity with our GCC partners and condemn in the strongest terms the attacks continuously launched by Iran on its regional neighbors. Mr. President, Iran's actions and use of its proxies, Hezbollah, Houthis, and others, to destabilize the wider Middle East severely undermine international peace and security. Iranian attacks against the GCC are enabled by Russian military intelligence and technological support. Just as Iranian weapons and technology have been used by Russia to kill innocent Ukrainian civilians, Iran now is supported by Russia in conducting widespread, systematic attacks against civilian and energy infrastructure in the Gulf states. And we call on Iran to halt its deliberate and unjustifiable attacks against civilians and critical infrastructure in the GCC that constitute violation of international law and international humanitarian law. Equally unacceptable is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which threatens the global economy, energy supplies, and agricultural production by disrupting trade in fertilizers. And we welcome the declaration adopted on the 19th of March by the Council of the International Maritime Organization and underline that Iran must comply with Resolution 2817 and ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. We know the Secretary General's efforts to mitigate the negative effects of the global trade and humanitarian needs caused by the disruption of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. In conclusion, Mr. President, we remain confident that despite the turbulent times, the UN and the GCC partnership will continue to evolve and contribute to advancing peace, stability, and sustainable progress in the Middle East and beyond. Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I congratulate Bahrain on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for this month, commend Bahrain for the initiative to convene this meeting, and welcome His Excellency Foreign Minister Al-Zayani for presiding over the meeting. I thank ASG Chiari and Secretary General Al-Bodavi for their briefings. The Gulf Cooperation Council is one of the most dynamic regional organizations in the Middle East. In recent years, it has accelerated economic diversification and integration, steadily strengthened strategic autonomy and solidarity, and actively contributed to regional peace and stability. Its international standing and influence continue to rise. Last June, the 79th session of the General Assembly adopted by consensus the resolution on cooperation between the UN and GCC, setting up a framework for such cooperation, which China welcomes. At present, the global landscape is undergoing profound changes, and the Middle East remains in a state of turmoil. China supports the GCC in playing a greater role in international affairs, and supports the United Nations and the GCC in accordance with Chapter 8 of the UN Charter in strengthening dialogue and cooperation and deepening partnership so as to jointly promote regional peace and development. I will make 3 points. First, we must firmly uphold the correct direction for global progress. Cooperation between the UN and the regional and sub-regional organizations is both an explicit requirement of the UN Charter and an important embodiment of multilateralism in practice. China appreciates the GCC countries' long-standing adherence to pragmatic and balanced foreign policies and their active pursuit of diversified diplomacy. We support and encourage the GCC to continue this fine tradition, resolutely uphold the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, practice genuine multilateralism, safeguard an international system with the UN at its core and an international order based on international law, and promote global governance toward greater fairness and justice. Second, we must actively pursue political solutions to hotspot issues. The use of force cannot bring peace. Political settlement is the fundamental way forward. GCC states enjoy unique advantages in understanding the root causes of regional conflicts. The Council should strengthen communication with GCC states, maximize the convergence of political will for political solutions, and enhance efforts in such key areas as conflict prevention, diplomatic mediation, and post-conflict reconstruction. China supports regional countries in upholding a vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, resolving differences through dialogue and consultation, building a collective security architecture for the Gulf, and fostering lasting good neighborly relations. Third, we must support the development and prosperity of regional countries. GCC states are rich in energy resources, and their economic diversification is gaining momentum. The international community should fully respect the historical and cultural traditions of GCC states, support them in strengthening strategic autonomy, and enhancing unity and cooperation, and encourage them to explore development paths suited to their national conditions and oppose any interference in their internal affairs by any country. Support should also be given to the GCC's sustainable development endeavors, deepening mutually beneficial cooperation in climate change response, combating desertification, economic integration, connectivity, thereby contributing to the common development of the Global South. President, the escalating hostilities in the Middle East are not only undermining regional peace and stability, but also directly affecting international energy, finance, trade, and shipping, harming the common interests of all countries. The origin of this war lies in the use of force by the US and Israel against Iran, which clearly violates the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and the basic norms governing international relations. The fundamental way to prevent further escalation lies in the cessation of military actions by the US and Israel. At the same time, the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of GCC states must be fully respected. China does not go along with Iran's attacks against GCC states and condemns all indiscriminate attacks against civilians and non-military targets. The security of shipping lanes must not be disrupted. Recently, China and Pakistan issued a 5-point initiative on restoring peace and stability in the Gulf and the Middle East region, calling for immediate cessation of hostilities, start of peace talks as soon as possible, security of non-military targets, security of shipping lanes, and the primacy of the UN Charter. The China-Pakistan 5-point initiative is open, and we welcome response and participation of all countries and international organizations so as to help the international community build broader consensus and stronger synergy and contribute to de-escalation and the restoration of peace and stability in the Gulf and the Middle East at an early date. The Council bears the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and should uphold an objective, impartial, and fair position. Under the current circumstances, authorizing member states to use force would amount to legitimizing the unlawful and indiscriminate use of force, which would inevitably lead to further escalation of the situation and lead to serious consequences. The Council must proceed with caution and play an active role in de-escalating the situation and restoring dialogue and negotiations. President, China is a good friend and good partner of the GCC states and has established strategic partnerships with the GCC and all its member states. In December 2022, President Xi Jinping and leaders of GCC states held the first China-GCC summit, jointly charting a new blueprint for the development of practical cooperation between China and the GCC. China stands ready to further strengthen communication and coordination with the GCC states, actively implement the outcomes of the summit, deepen cooperation across all fields, and jointly take China-GCC relationships to new depth and greater substance, making new contributions to regional peace, stability, and development. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. We extend our sincere congratulations, Your Excellency, Minister Al-Sayani, on the assumption of the presidency in April. We wish the Kingdom of Bahrain every success and reaffirm our full cooperation. On this occasion, I would like to thank and congratulate the U.S. for a very successful presidency in the month of March. Let me also thank ASG Chiari and warmly welcome the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, His Excellency Hassan Mohammed Al-Badawi. Today's meeting is both timely and necessary, for we gather at a moment when the Middle East stands at a crossroads once again. From the very beginning, Greece has unequivocally condemned the Iranian attacks against members of the GCC, Jordan, and elsewhere. We stand in full solidarity with our partners in the region. We were also among the first member states to co-sponsor Resolution 2817 alongside an unprecedented number of countries. Such actions violate the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. They shake the architecture of regional stability. At the same time, attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure violate international humanitarian law. We condemn such attacks, and we underline once again the need for maximum restraint. We call for immediate de-escalation from all sides that will create the conditions for a return to dialogue and ultimately negotiations. We also underscore the critical importance of maritime security and freedom of navigation. Strategic international waterways, including the Strait of Hormuz, are lifelines for the global trade and energy supply. Any disruption constitutes a serious threat to international peace and security. Compliance with the UN Charter and international law, including the international law of the sea, as reflected in the UNCLOS, must remain a top shared priority in this regard. Attention must be given to diplomacy and international efforts to de-escalate and diffuse tensions in the Strait of Hormuz and the wider conflict. Mr. President, since its establishment, the GCC has cultivated political credibility. It has contributed to various mediation efforts and humanitarian engagement in a way that complements and reinforces the work of the United Nations. Hence, it is evident that the Security Council, although carrying the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, is well complemented by the GCC. Our cooperation rests on solid foundations: respect for international law, the UN Charter, and the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of states in all the serious challenges to international peace and security we are facing, from Gaza and Iran to Ukraine. As envisioned in the UN Charter, such cooperation with regional organizations is essential. It provides the bridge between the global vision of the UN Charter principles and regional conditions and reality. Mr. President, my country's ties with the Arab world are deep and enduring. They are rooted in history, enriched by culture, and strengthened through cooperation, serving on this council alongside Bahrain. We remain committed to acting as a voice for dialogue, diplomacy, and peace. There is vast potential in further strengthening UN-GCC cooperation in various fields, such as conflict prevention, mediation, counterterrorism, and humanitarian response. But also, beyond this, in empowering women as agents of peace, in giving youth a stake in stability, in addressing food, water, and environmental challenges as drivers of security. The partnership between the UN and the GCC is a promise that multilateralism can deliver and that peace, however distant it may seem, remains within reach. Greece has long stood as a committed advocate of multilateralism and international law. We believe that peace, like trust, is built jointly, and we aim to strengthen UN-GCC cooperation further to this end. In conclusion, Greece reiterates its call for restraint, for dialogue, and for diplomacy at a time when neither the Arab region nor the world can afford another prolonged spiral of violence. It is clear that if we act together, we can move from crisis management to peace building. For in the end, peace is not forged in isolation, it is forged through cooperation. Shukran.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to start by congratulating you and the Kingdom of Bahrain on taking up the presidency for the Council for April. And I would also like to thank the United States for a very successful presidency during March. Let me also thank ASG Chiari and the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Yassim Al-Boudawi, for their briefings. Foreign Minister Al-Sayani, thank you for your presence here today. Through you, let me also commend the members of the GCC for their active contribution to the maintenance of international peace and security. Denmark also welcomes the Council agreement on the presidential statement and commends Bahrain for its efforts in this timely initiative. Mr. President, we meet today in the shadow of a regional escalation of major proportions, one which demands the continued attention of this Council and also call for the close cooperation between the UN and the GCC. We are deeply concerned by the continued escalation of the situation in the Middle East. Over the past month, we have seen a large number of countries in the Gulf being drawn into a conflict not of their making. This has profound and grave implications, not only for the people across the region, but for international peace and security. We reiterate our call for the protection of civilians and full respect for international law, including international humanitarian law. Let me recall Denmark's strong condemnation of Iran's continuous attacks on the countries in the region. We stand in full solidarity with the GCC and other countries concerned. As these attacks continue, we are witnessing grave consequences for the region and beyond, including for the global economy. We welcome the Secretary General's recent appointment of Jean Arnaud as personal envoy and the establishment of a dedicated task force to develop and propose technical mechanisms in the Strait of Hormuz to meet humanitarian needs. Denmark hopes that this could be an important confidence-building measure in the region. Mr. President, the GCC is an important and valuable partner in the region, one that has consistently used its voice to call for de-escalation and good neighborhood relations. We welcome the active and constructive role of the GCC in advancing regional stability. And in this regard, we welcome the adoption of Resolution 2817 and call for its full and swift implementation. Denmark stresses the importance of safeguarding maritime routes and freedom of navigation in accordance with international law, as well as the safety and security of supply chains, shipping, seafarers, and the stability of global energy markets. The Strait of Hormuz must be reopened immediately. The current situation is unacceptable, and the repercussions risk spinning out of control. To this end, we are engaging actively in the negotiations on the draft resolution led by Bahrain to ensure a strong message from a united Council. Mr. President, in closing, a close partnership between the UN and GCC is vital to advance regional stability. We look forward to the continued cooperation in pursuit of lasting peace and prosperity for the region and beyond. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary General Abu Dhabi, good to see you, and Assistant Secretary General Chiari for their briefings, and again, welcome Foreign Minister Al-Zayani, and congratulations to Bahrain on the start of its council presidency. Colleagues, President Trump said during his visit to Riyadh last year and his first overseas visit of his second term that the nations of the Gulf Cooperation Council are at the forefront, are leading in creating a stable, peaceful, and prosperous Middle East. On a personal note, when I served as a soldier, I fought alongside soldiers from your countries. We came under fire together. We fought together, and we defeated extremism together. But there was one thing that my GCC colleagues could do better than me or any of my other colleagues with us, and that was to make people believe in a better future. I'll never forget a captain from the United Arab Emirates who would talk to and often convince Afghans to reject the extremism of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He held out the promise of prosperity, of education, of religious tolerance. He would point to these great cities that I've now had the honor to visit in my life, of Riyadh, of Doha, Dubai, Manama, Kuwait City. Each of them welcome shores for tourism, for business, and for education. And he pointed, importantly, to these Afghans stuck in a cycle of violence and poverty to a better life for their next generation, with a religious and a cultural authority that no Westerner could do. And so for 45 years, the GCC has helped anchor regional stability in one of the most strategically consequential parts of the world, where the arteries of commerce and energy and national security run right through their backyards. And its members have never closed their ports or waterways or commerce lanes to our ships. To the contrary, since its founding in 1981, GCC members have worked to preserve order through decades of conflict, extremism, and external aggression because they have sown the seeds of stability. The Gulf has become one of the great engines of global economic growth, trade, investment, and innovation. And so as we work now to negotiate and implement President Trump's comprehensive peace plan to finally, hopefully, prayerfully, end the Gaza conflict and adopt Resolution 2803 that authorized the Board of Peace and the International Stabilization Force and the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, our GCC colleagues were there. They were there to build support and to contribute to its successful launch, and have now engaged and are contributing their time and their treasure to the Board of Peace and to actually implement the steps necessary to resolve that conflict. And so, additionally, when President Trump made history with his announcement of U.S. sanctions relief for the Syrian people with the new government in Syria, we worked with this council to provide sanctions relief, but yet again, it was the GCC who worked with us to reintegrate Syria into the region and to supercharge its economic recovery. And now, as we speak, even as Iran has continued its indiscriminate attacks against their cities, their neighborhoods, their hotels, their resorts, international airports, civilian infrastructure, we've seen our Gulf partners rise to the occasion, and I want to personally thank them and thank them on behalf of the United States. They're rising to the occasion in the region, and they're rising to the occasion here at the Security Council. We too long for the coming days where we once again hear the sounds in your streets that ring out with race cars from Formula One, not F-15s and certainly not Shahed drones. We are grateful for Bahrain's achievement in pushing forward the historic Resolution 2817 with the most co-sponsors of any Security Council resolution in UN history, and for its continued efforts to hold the Iranian regime to account. Colleagues, we've heard a lot of comments today about securing shipping lanes, about condemning Iran's attacks, about stopping its atrocious attacks on civilian shipping and other forms of infrastructure, that I would call on you to further those statements and those speeches with real help to Bahrain and the GCC countries in doing something about it. No country, certainly not a genocidal Iranian regime that massacres its own people and has spent decades sowing instability and violence around the world, no country should be able to hold the world's economies hostage to try to gain leverage in a dispute. So, colleagues, the bottom line is this. I believe, we believe, the United States believes that GCC can teach this body much about what it means to get back to basics. And the bottom line is that we, our allies and partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council, can count on the United States to march alongside you for a better future, both here at this council and in the region. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. The Council has before it the text of a statement by the President on behalf of the Council on the subject of today's meeting. I thank the Council members for their valuable contributions to this statement. In accordance with the understanding reached among the members of the Council, I shall take it that the members of the Security Council agree to the statement, which will be issued as a document of the Security Council under the symbol S/PRST/2026/1. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.